The discovery that changed everything in the dusty archives of Thornwick Castle. A restoration worker's gloved hands trembled as she carefully unfolded a piece of cream-colored stationery that had been hidden behind a loose stone for over 2 decades. The elegant script, written in midnight blue ink, began with words that would send shockwaves through the monarchy. My dearest William, if you are reading this, then the truth I could never speak aloud has finally found its way to you. This wasn't just any letter. It was written by Duchess Catherine Thornwick, the beloved People's Duchess who had died tragically in 1999, leaving behind 2 young sons and a nation in mourning. Now, 25 years later, her secret words to her eldest son would reveal a truth so profound it would reshape everything the royal family thought they knew about love, duty, and the price of the crown. What secrets had Catherine kept hidden? What revelations would emerge from beyond the grave to challenge the very foundations of the Thornwick dynasty? The answers lay waiting in elegant cursive script, in a letter that should never have been found. The morning mist clung to the ancient towers of Thornwick Castle like whispered secrets refusing to let go. Margaret Holloway, a conservation specialist with 20 years of experience restoring historical buildings, had seen her share of hidden treasures tucked away in forgotten corners of grand estates. But nothing had prepared her for this moment, as she carefully extracted a sealed envelope from behind a loose stone in what had once been the Duchess Catherine's private study. The room had remained untouched since that terrible September night in 1999 when news of the car accident in the Parisian tunnel had shattered not just the royal family, but an entire nation. Catherine Thornwick, the divorced wife of Prince Edward and mother to Princes William and Harry, had been more than royalty to the British people. She had been their beacon of compassion, their bridge between the ancient traditions of monarchy and the modern world's desperate need for authenticity. Margaret's fingers traced the envelope's edges with practiced care. The paper was of the finest quality, bearing the subtle watermark of Thornwick Palace stationery. But it was the handwriting on the front that made her breath catch in her throat. In Catherine's unmistakable flowing script were the words, "For my beloved William, to be opened when he truly needs to understand." The castle's head curator, James Morrison, was summoned immediately. A tall, scholarly man in his 60s who had served the royal household for over 30 years, James had witnessed the transformation of the Thornwick family from within its walls. He had been there during Catherine's fairy tale wedding to Prince Edward in 1981, had watched the gradual dissolution of their marriage through the 1990s, and had stood in this very room the morning after Catherine's death, when a grief-stricken Prince William, then just 15 years old, had locked himself inside for hours. "My God," James whispered as Margaret showed him the envelope. His weathered hands, which had handled countless historical documents, shook slightly as he recognized the significance of their discovery. "We need to contact Prince William immediately." But Margaret, whose expertise in historical preservation had taught her to think beyond the immediate moment, raised a crucial concern. "James, shouldn't we first determine what's inside? If this contains private family matters, or worse, state secrets, we need to understand the implications before involving anyone else." The ethical dilemma was profound. Here was a private communication from a deceased mother to her son, discovered by chance during routine restoration work. Did they have the right to know its contents? Did they have the right to keep its existence secret? The letter represented more than just words on paper. It was potentially a final gift from Catherine to William, hidden away perhaps in those dark final months when their relationship had grown strained due to the pressure surrounding her divorce and her struggle to maintain her role as mother while navigating the treacherous waters of royal protocol. After hours of careful consideration and consultation with the castle's legal advisors, the decision was made to open the letter with the utmost discretion. Margaret and James, along with Dr. Sarah Chun, a forensic document analyst, gathered in the secured archive room. The letter was photographed extensively before opening, each fold and crease documented for historical preservation. As the envelope was carefully unsealed using museum-quality conservation techniques, the first lines of Catherine's letter were revealed. Her elegant handwriting, though showing signs of emotional stress in certain passages, filled multiple pages. The opening paragraph alone was enough to confirm that this was no ordinary maternal correspondence. "My dearest William," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the truth I could never speak aloud has finally found its way to you. I write this in my darkest hour, knowing that the forces arrayed against our family run deeper than either of us ever imagined. There are things about your heritage, about our bloodline, and about the very nature of our crown that have been hidden from you. I fear for what lies ahead, but more than that, I fear that without this knowledge, you will be powerless to protect yourself and your future family from the same fate that has befallen me." The room fell silent as the weight of Catherine's words sank in. This wasn't simply a mother's loving goodbye to her son. It was a warning, a revelation, and possibly a roadmap for understanding mysteries that had puzzled royal historians for generations. The letter spoke of ancient obligations, hidden bloodlines, and powers that transcend the crown. It mentioned names that didn't appear in any official royal genealogy and referenced events that had been carefully omitted from historical records. Dr. Chen's preliminary analysis confirmed the letter's authenticity. The paper's composition, the ink's chemical signature, and, most importantly, Catherine's distinctive handwriting patterns all verified that this was indeed written by the late Duchess. Carbon dating would provide final confirmation, but the evidence was already overwhelming. As Margaret carefully photographed each page, she noticed something else that sent chills down her spine. In the margin of the third page, Catherine had written a single line in different ink, as if added hastily. "They know I know. Time is running out." The implications were staggering. Had Catherine discovered something dangerous in the weeks or months before her death? Had the knowledge contained in this letter played a role in the events that led to that tragic night in Paris? The questions multiplied with each revelation, and it became clear that this discovery would force a re-examination of everything the world thought it knew about the most famous royal family tragedy of the modern era. James Morrison found himself grappling with a responsibility he had never anticipated. As someone who had dedicated his life to preserving royal history, he now held in his hands what might be the most significant royal document discovered in decades. The letter didn't just contain personal revelations. It potentially held the key to understanding a mystery that had captivated and tormented the public for 25 years. That evening, as the conservation team secured the letter in a climate-controlled vault, none of them could have predicted how their discovery would soon transform not just Prince William's understanding of his heritage, but the very nature of the monarchy itself. The letter was more than a message from beyond the grave. It was a catalyst that would force long-buried truths into the light and challenge the carefully constructed narrative that had protected the royal family for generations. The first page alone had revealed enough to change everything. 4 more pages waited to be fully analyzed, each promising to unveil deeper layers of a truth that Catherine had risked everything to preserve for her son. The question now wasn't just what secrets the letter contained, but whether the world was ready to hear them. 3 days after the letter's discovery, Prince William Alexander Thornwick, now 35 and heir apparent to the throne, stood in the same study where his mother had penned her final revelation. The years had transformed the once gangly teenager into a commanding presence, bearing the weight of royal responsibility with the same grace that had made his mother beloved worldwide. Yet as he held the letter that had emerged from the shadows of his past, the composed future king revealed glimpses of the vulnerable boy who had lost his mother at such a crucial age. "She hid this here," William murmured, running his fingers along the stone where the letter had been concealed. "In our special place." His wife, Catherine, stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The couple had been married for 15 years, and she had learned to recognize the subtle signs when memories of his mother surfaced with particular intensity. James Morrison watched respectfully from near the doorway as William read through the letter for the second time since arriving at Thornwick Castle. The first reading had taken place in the castle's private library, with only Catherine present. That initial encounter with his mother's words had left the prince visibly shaken, prompting a long walk through the castle grounds before he felt ready to return to the study where the discovery had been made. "The bloodline records she mentions," William said, looking up from the letter. "James, you've been here longer than anyone. Have you ever heard references to the Ravencroft lineage?" James's expression grew thoughtful. "There have always been whispers, Your Highness. Stories passed down through the household staff, fragments of conversations I overheard as a young man working in the archives. Your mother spent considerable time in those final months researching family genealogy. She requested access to documents that hadn't been examined in decades, some dating back to the Tudor period. The letter's second page had revealed Catherine's most startling discovery. According to her research, the Thornwick royal line wasn't purely descended from the traditional Germanic houses that official histories claimed. Instead, Catherine had uncovered evidence of a deliberate cover-up spanning 4 centuries, designed to hide the family's connection to the Ravencroft bloodline, a powerful medieval house that had been officially declared extinct in 1485 following their support of Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth. But the Ravencrofts weren't just political casualties. William read aloud from his mother's careful script. They were practitioners of what the church deemed dangerous knowledge. Not witchcraft or superstition, but something far more threatening to established power: the ability to unite people across class and religious boundaries through genuine understanding and empathy. This gift, this calling, runs in our blood, William. It's why people have always been drawn to us in ways that transcend typical royal adoration. Catherine continued her account, describing how she had discovered that several mysterious deaths in royal history weren't accidents or natural causes, but systematic eliminations of family members who had demonstrated these unusual abilities too openly. The letter detailed her growing realization that the car accident that would eventually claim her life might not have been the random tragedy the world believed it to be. Catherine's investigation had led her to a secret archive maintained by a group calling themselves the Keepers of the Crown. This organization, according to her research, had existed for centuries as guardians of royal legitimacy, tasked with preserving the monarchy's power by any means necessary. They had orchestrated cover-ups, manipulated successions, and, when required, eliminated threats to the established order. "What terrifies me most," Catherine had written, "is that they see our ability to genuinely connect with people as a threat to the very system they've spent centuries protecting. They want a monarchy that inspires reverence from a distance, not one that creates real bonds of understanding and love. Your gift, William, is stronger than mine ever was. I've watched you with the homeless, with the grieving, with those society has forgotten. You don't just sympathize, you truly understand their pain as if it were your own. This terrifies them." The third page revealed Catherine's attempts to protect her sons by teaching them to suppress their natural empathetic abilities. She described the heartbreak of watching William withdraw from the charitable work that had brought him such joy, knowing that his safety depended on appearing more conventionally royal and less dangerously compassionate. But the letter also contained hope. Catherine had discovered that other European royal families possessed similar bloodlines and abilities hidden beneath centuries of careful breeding and political marriages designed to dilute these traits. She had established contact with discreet alliances among these families, creating a network of protection and mutual support that could safeguard future generations. "There's a safe house in Scotland," Catherine had written, "managed by the MacLeod family, who have served as secret protectors of our kind for 8 generations. If you ever feel threatened, if the Keepers move against you as I believe they're moving against me, Eleanor MacLeod will provide sanctuary. But, more importantly, she can teach you to fully embrace your heritage instead of hiding from it." William set the letter down carefully, his mind racing with implications that extended far beyond his personal family history. If Catherine's discoveries were accurate, then The modern monarchy was built on a foundation of lies and systematic suppression of the very qualities that could make it truly serve the people. The timing of her research, Catherine observed quietly. It wasn't coincidental, was it? She was planning something. William nodded slowly. She was going to reveal everything. Look at this. He pointed to a passage near the end of the third page. She mentions a documentary she was secretly helping to produce, working with investigative journalists who had uncovered similar patterns in other European monarchies. She was building a case for complete transparency. The enormity of what his mother had attempted began to crystallize. Catherine hadn't just been the people's duchess through natural charisma. She had been systematically documenting and preparing to expose centuries of royal deception. Her divorce from Prince Edward hadn't been simply about marital incompatibility. It had been about fundamental disagreements over the future direction of the monarchy itself. She knew she was in danger. William continued reading. Listen to this. They have made their position clear through intermediaries. Conform to traditional royal expectations or face the consequences. But I cannot continue to pretend that our role is merely ceremonial when we have the ability to create real change, real healing in the world. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the study, William came to a profound realization. His mother's death hadn't just been a personal tragedy. It had been the silencing of a revolution that could have transformed the very nature of monarchy. But her letter suggested that the story wasn't over. She had hidden more than just words behind that stone wall. The final lines of the third page contained coordinates and a cryptic reference to the vault beneath Ravenscroft Abbey. Catherine had apparently hidden additional evidence, documents, and artifacts that would prove her discoveries beyond any doubt. But accessing them would require William to step fully into a world of danger that had already claimed his mother's life. The question that haunted him as twilight approached wasn't whether the information in the letter was true. Deep in his heart, he had always known that his unusual ability to connect with people, to sense their emotions and understand their deepest needs, was something beyond normal human empathy. The question was whether he had the courage to follow his mother's path, knowing where it had led her, and whether he could succeed where she had failed. The letter in his hands represented more than family history. It was a call to action that would force him to choose between the safe, conventional future that had been planned for him and the dangerous but transformative path his mother had begun to walk. Either choice would change not just his life, but the future of the monarchy itself. The journey to Scotland took place under the cover of an unofficial royal visit, with William and Catherine traveling in a private vehicle accompanied only by a single trusted security officer. As their car wound through the misty highlands toward the remote village of Kilmartin, William felt the weight of his mother's revelation settling deeper into his consciousness with each passing mile. Eleanor MacLeod lived in a stone cottage that seemed to grow naturally from the Scottish landscape itself. At 72, she possessed the kind of timeless dignity that spoke of generations spent keeping profound secrets. Her silver hair was braided with small charms that caught the light, and her green eyes held depths that suggested she knew far more about the world's hidden workings than most people could imagine. "Prince William," she said simply as she opened her door, as if she had been expecting him. "Catherine wrote to me about you many times. She was so proud and so worried. Please come inside." The cottage's interior defied its modest external appearance. The walls were lined with books in multiple languages, maps of Europe marked with mysterious symbols, and portraits of individuals whose faces bore striking resemblances to various royal families. But it was the large table in the center of the main room that commanded attention. Spread across its surface were documents, photographs, and artifacts that appeared to chronicle centuries of hidden royal history. "Your mother was not the first to discover the truth," Eleanor explained as she prepared tea with practiced movements. "Every generation produces at least one member of the bloodline who begins to question why they feel so different, why they can sense things others cannot, why their presence affects people in ways that go beyond traditional royal charisma. She gestured to a wall displaying family trees that intertwined in complex patterns, showing connections between royal houses across Europe that had never appeared in official genealogies. The Ravencroft bloodline didn't die out at Bosworth Field, as the histories claim. It was carefully preserved and strategically bred into the major royal families of Europe. But with each generation, the keepers worked harder to suppress the gift that came with that heritage. William studied the charts with growing amazement. According to Eleanor's research, which built upon his mother's work, the empathetic abilities that ran in their family were present in royal lines across the continent. The Swedish royal family's remarkable environmental activism wasn't just political positioning. It came from a genuine ability to feel the Earth's distress. The Norwegian royals' deep connection to their people's welfare wasn't mere duty. It was literally sensing the emotional needs of their nation. But why hide it? Catherine asked. Wouldn't these abilities make monarchs more effective, more beloved? Eleanor's expression grew somber. Because truly empathetic rulers cannot be controlled. Think about the great social changes of the past centuries. The abolition of slavery, workers' rights, women's suffrage, civil rights movements. Every significant advancement in human dignity came about despite royal opposition, not because of it. The keepers understood that monarchs with genuine empathetic gifts would inevitably side with the oppressed over the oppressor, with justice over tradition. She pulled out a leather-bound journal that had belonged to Catherine. Its pages revealed the depth of the late Duchess's investigation into what she had termed the suppression. Catherine had documented case after case of royal family members throughout history who had died under suspicious circumstances, always following periods when they had demonstrated unusual compassion or had begun challenging established power structures. Your mother's research led her to understand that the keepers weren't just protecting the monarchy, Eleanor continued. They were protecting an entire system of power that depended on keeping empathetic leaders from rising to positions where they could create real change. The royal families were just the most visible targets of this oppression. William absorbed this information while grappling with memories that suddenly made disturbing sense. His mother's increasing isolation in her final years, the way palace officials had gradually limited her access to certain charitable organizations, the subtle but persistent pressure to conform to more traditional royal behaviors. It all fit the pattern Eleanor described. She found the vault, Eleanor said quietly, producing a small metal key from beneath a floorboard. Catherine discovered the location of the hidden archive beneath Ravencroft Abbey. She made one trip there, just weeks before her death, and what she found convinced her that the danger was more immediate than she had realized. The key felt surprisingly heavy in William's palm. According to Eleanor, the vault contained centuries of suppressed documents, artifacts that proved the true extent of the Ravencroft bloodline's influence on European history, and, most importantly, evidence of the Keeper's modern operations and future plans. Your mother wasn't killed because of a romantic relationship or political scandal, Eleanor revealed with quiet intensity. She was eliminated because she had gathered enough evidence to expose the Keeper's existence and dismantle the system they had spent centuries building. But she was also clever enough to hide copies of everything she had discovered. The cottage grew quiet except for the crackling of the fire, as William processed the magnitude of what Eleanor was telling him. His mother hadn't been a victim of tragic circumstances. She had been a revolutionary whose discoveries threatened to reshape the understanding of power itself. "There's more," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Catherine discovered that the Keepers are planning what they call the final suppression. Within the next decade, they intend to eliminate the remaining bloodlines entirely and replace them with completely controllable puppet monarchies. Your family isn't just in danger, William. You're running out of time. As night fell over the Scottish Highlands, William faced a choice that would determine not just his own future, but the fate of an ancient heritage that connected him to powers and responsibilities he was only beginning to understand. His mother's letter had been more than a revelation. It had been a call to arms in a war most people didn't even know was being fought. The key to Ravenscroft Abbey felt warm in his hand, as if responding to his touch. Somewhere in a hidden vault lay the evidence that could free the royal families of Europe from centuries of manipulation and control. But claiming that evidence would mean accepting the same risks that had cost his mother her life. The ancient stones of Ravenscroft Abbey stood sentinel against the Yorkshire moors, their weathered surfaces bearing witness to nearly 1,000 years of history. What had once been a thriving monastery now existed as carefully preserved ruins, maintained by English heritage as a monument to medieval religious life. But beneath its foundations lay secrets that no historical guidebook had ever documented. William and Catherine arrived at the Abbey just before dawn, accompanied by Eleanor MacLeod and Dr. Sarachan. Their cover story was simple: a private historical research visit by the heir to the throne, investigating his family's medieval connections. The Abbey's caretaker, an elderly man named Thomas Weatherby, whose own family had maintained the grounds for 6 generations, greeted them with the kind of knowing silence that suggested the MacLeod network extended further than Eleanor had initially revealed. The entrance is through the old crypt, Eleanor explained as they made their way past the ruined altar toward a section of the abbey that remained off-limits to public tours. Your mother discovered it by following architectural inconsistencies in the foundation layout. The builders of this place created something far more complex than a simple monastery. The crypt beneath the abbey's chancel appeared unremarkable at first glance. Stone sarcophagi of long-dead abbots lined the walls, their Latin inscriptions worn smooth by centuries of moisture and decay. But Eleanor led them to the farthest corner, where the wall's stonework showed subtle differences in construction technique. Catherine's letter mentioned specific measurements, Dr. Chen said, consulting the pages they had brought with them. 17 stones from the eastern wall, count upward to the 5th row. Her fingers traced the pattern Catherine had documented, and, with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the underground silence, a section of the wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow passage that descended into darkness. The tunnel beyond was clearly not medieval construction. While the entrance had been cleverly disguised to match the crypt's ancient stonework, the passage itself bore marks of much more recent engineering. Electric wiring ran along the ceiling, though the power had long since been disconnected. The walls were lined with a mixture of natural stone and reinforced concrete, suggesting ongoing maintenance well into the modern era. The keepers maintained this place, Eleanor explained as their flashlights illuminated the descending path. It served as both a storage facility for sensitive documents and, when necessary, a meeting place for their inner council. Catherine's research suggested they abandoned it in the 1990s when security became too difficult to maintain, but they left everything behind. The tunnel ended at a heavy metal door that looked entirely out of place in the medieval setting. William's key fitted perfectly into a lock that showed signs of recent use, confirming Eleanor's suspicion that others had accessed the vault since Catherine's death. The door opened onto a chamber that took their breath away. The vault was enormous, carved directly from the bedrock beneath the abbey. Climate control systems maintained perfect preservation conditions, and sophisticated lighting revealed the true scope of what Catherine had discovered. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, document storage boxes, and display cases containing artifacts that spanned centuries. At the center of the room stood a massive oak table surrounded by chairs, as if the keepers had conducted their most sensitive business in this underground chamber. "My God," Catherine whispered, her voice echoing in the vaulted space. "It's like a shadow government archive." William approached the nearest filing cabinet with trembling hands. The documents inside were meticulously organized, bearing labels that read like a history of European royal manipulation. Succession interventions 1600 to 1700, bloodline suppression protocols, emergency elimination procedures, and, most chillingly, active surveillance, current generation. The file marked with his mother's name was thick with surveillance reports, psychological assessments, and detailed plans for containing what the keepers termed her destabilizing influence. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, contained a single line that made William's blood run cold. Subject has accessed the vault. Protocol 7 authorized. Dr. Chun moved systematically through the chamber, photographing everything with professional efficiency. These aren't just historical records, she observed. Look at the dates on these more recent files. The keepers were active well into the 21st century. Some of these surveillance reports are from less than 5 years ago. Eleanor had gravitated toward a section dedicated to the Ravencroft bloodline itself. The documents here told a story that had been erased from official histories. The Ravencrofts hadn't been mere political allies of Richard III. They had been advisors whose unusual gifts had made them invaluable to rulers seeking to understand and serve their people genuinely. Their suppression hadn't been about political loyalty. It had been about eliminating a bloodline that could challenge the fundamental assumptions about power and governance. Your ancestors could literally feel the needs of their people, Eleanor explained, showing William documents that detailed specific examples. Not in any mystical sense, but through an enhanced capacity for emotional resonance that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. They could walk through a village and sense where hunger was most acute, where grief needed addressing, where injustice festered in silence. William found himself drawn to a display case containing personal artifacts that had belonged to his Ravencroft ancestors. A simple silver pendant caught his attention, its surface engraved with symbols that seemed to resonate with something deep in his memory. As his fingers touched the glass, he experienced a sudden rush of sensations that weren't his own. The desperate hunger of a mother unable to feed her children, the crushing loneliness of an elderly man forgotten by his family, the fierce hope of a young woman dreaming of education despite poverty's constraints. The pendant, Eleanor said softly, noticing his reaction. Catherine wore it briefly during her last visit here. She said it was like having every emotion in the kingdom flowing through her at once. Overwhelming, but also clarifying. She understood then why the keepers feared your bloodline so intensely. The chamber's deepest section contained the most damning evidence of all, detailed plans for what the keepers called the modern succession. These documents, some bearing dates within the past decade, outlined strategies for ensuring that future monarchs will be selected based on their controllability rather than their bloodline or popular support. The plans included psychological manipulation techniques, strategic marriages to dilute empathetic traits, and, when necessary, the elimination of problematic bloodline carriers. But Catherine had done more than simply discover the keeper's plans. Her final entries revealed that she had been working to expose them through a coordinated effort with investigative journalists and sympathetic members of Parliament. She had gathered enough evidence to bring down the organization entirely, but she had needed more time to ensure the safety of her sources and the security of her evidence. She died 3 days before the story was scheduled to break, Eleanor revealed, showing them Catherine's final journal entry. The journalists involved were subsequently discredited or died in apparent accidents. The members of Parliament who had agreed to support her investigation either retracted their involvement or found themselves embroiled in manufactured scandals. William closed his eyes, feeling the full weight of his mother's sacrifice settling on his shoulders. She hadn't died in a random accident. She had died protecting information that could free not just his family, but potentially transform the relationship between monarchy and people across Europe. The letter she had left him wasn't just an explanation. It was a torch being passed to the next generation. As they prepared to leave the vault, William made copies of the most crucial documents, while Eleanor helped them understand the broader implications of Catherine's discoveries. The evidence in this chamber could indeed expose the keepers and their centuries of manipulation, but using it would require the same courage that had cost his mother her life. Standing in the threshold between the vault and the tunnel that led back to the world above, William realized that his mother's final gift wasn't just knowledge. It was a choice. He could return to his conventional royal life, keeping these revelations secret and protecting his family through ignorance. Or he could embrace his heritage fully, accept the dangers that came with it, and continue the revolution his mother had begun. The pendant's silver surface caught the light from his flashlight, and for a moment, William could have sworn he felt his mother's presence beside him, encouraging him toward the path that would honor not just her memory, but the memory of all the Ravencroft ancestors whose gifts had been suppressed in service of maintaining an unjust system. 6 months after the discovery of Catherine's letter, Prince William stood before a gathering unlike any the royal family had hosted in centuries. The Great Hall of Thornwick Castle had been transformed for what palace officials described as a historical symposium, but those present understood they were witnessing something far more significant: the first public revelation of truths that had been hidden for over 500 years. The audience was carefully chosen, but diverse. Investigative journalists sat beside constitutional scholars. Representatives from European royal families occupied chairs next to activists from various humanitarian organizations. Most importantly, Eleanor MacLeod and other descendants of the ancient protector families were present, along with individuals whose genealogical research had revealed their own connections to suppressed bloodlines. William had spent the intervening months carefully building alliances and gathering support for what he knew would be the most dangerous speech of his life. The evidence from Ravencroft Abbey had been meticulously verified by independent historians and forensic experts. Legal protections had been arranged for everyone involved in the revelation. Most crucially, William had reached out to sympathetic elements within the intelligence services who had their own suspicions about the Keeper's activities. "Ladies and gentlemen," William began, his voice carrying the authority of his royal training, but also a vulnerability that his conventional speeches had never revealed. "I stand before you today, not just as heir to the throne, but as the son of a woman who died protecting truths that could transform our understanding of leadership, empathy, and the proper relationship between rulers and those they serve." He gestured to a large screen where the first image appeared, a photograph of his mother's letter, its elegant script clearly visible. 3 months ago, workers renovating Thornwick Castle discovered a letter my mother had hidden before her death. What we found in that letter, and what we subsequently uncovered through her research, reveals that the monarchy you think you know is built on centuries of carefully constructed lies. The audience stirred as William began presenting the evidence methodically. He showed them the genealogical charts proving the Ravencroft connection, the documentation of the Keeper's organization, and, most powerfully, the surveillance files that revealed how his mother had been monitored and ultimately silenced. "The abilities my mother wrote about," William continued, his voice growing stronger with each revelation, "are not supernatural or mystical. Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand that certain genetic combinations can produce enhanced empathetic capacity, allowing individuals to literally feel and understand the emotions of others with extraordinary accuracy. This isn't magic, it's evolution." Dr. Amara Singh, a neuroscientist from Cambridge who had agreed to analyze the bloodline's documented abilities, took the podium to explain her research. "What we're seeing in the Ravencroft lineage appears to be a concentration of genes associated with mirror neuron activity and emotional processing. Individuals with these genetic combinations don't just observe others' emotions, they experience them as if they were their own. This creates leaders who cannot ignore suffering because they literally feel it as personal pain." The implications were staggering. If the royal families of Europe possessed enhanced empathetic abilities, then their historical role as detached ceremonial figures represented a massive waste of potential. Instead of ribbon-cutting and state dinners, they could be serving as bridges between different communities, as healers of social divisions, as leaders who truly understood the needs of their people. The Keepers understood this threat. William continued, showing documents that detailed centuries of systematic suppression. They recognized that empathetic rulers would inevitably challenge systems of inequality and oppression. So they developed elaborate protocols to either suppress these abilities or eliminate those who possessed them too strongly. Eleanor MacLeod, then, presented evidence of the Keeper's modern operations. The organization had evolved with the times, using sophisticated surveillance technology and psychological manipulation techniques. They had infiltrated intelligence services, media organizations, and even medical establishments to maintain their control over royal bloodlines. But they made one crucial mistake, Eleanor announced, producing a document that caused audible gasps throughout the hall. They kept records of everything. In their arrogance, they documented their crimes meticulously, never believing these files would be discovered. The document was a contemporary keeper's memorandum discussing the William problem. According to their analysis, Prince William's empathetic abilities were stronger than his mother's had been, and his position as future king made him exponentially more dangerous to their interests. The memorandum outlined contingency plans that ranged from character assassination to more permanent solutions. "This isn't just historical revelation," Williams said, his voice carrying a new note of determination. "This is a present danger. The Keepers are still active, still working to control and suppress empathetic leadership wherever it emerges. They're not just monitoring royal families. They're tracking anyone whose emotional gifts could threaten existing power structures." The speech's climax came when William made his unprecedented announcement. "Effective immediately, I am withdrawing from the traditional line of succession and establishing what I am calling the Empathetic Alliance. This organization will work to identify, protect, and empower individuals across Europe who possess enhanced empathetic abilities, regardless of their royal status or social background." The hall erupted as the implications of his decision became clear. William was essentially abdicating his future throne to pursue a path that his mother had died trying to walk. But he wasn't walking it alone. Representatives from Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, and Dutch royal families rose to announce their own participation in the alliance. The network Catherine had begun to build was finally coming into the light. "The age of suppression is ending," William declared as the room gradually quieted. For centuries, those with the greatest capacity for understanding and healing have been forced to hide their gifts or face elimination. Today, we choose a different path. We choose to embrace what makes us different and use it to serve humanity's highest aspirations. The speech concluded with a moment that would be replayed countless times in the months that followed. William put on his mother's silver pendant, the same one that had overwhelmed Catherine with its amplification of empathetic ability. But instead of being overcome, William stood straighter, his eyes taking on a clarity that seemed to reach every person in the room. "I feel your hope," he said simply, addressing not just those present but the cameras broadcasting to the world. "I feel your fear, your excitement, your skepticism. This is what my mother died protecting. Not the right to rule, but the ability to truly serve. The Empathetic Alliance will work to ensure that no one else with these gifts will ever have to choose between using them and staying alive." In the weeks that followed, the revelation sent shockwaves through governments and institutions worldwide. Traditional power structures scrambled to respond to a threat they had never anticipated. The possibility that leadership based on genuine empathy rather than manipulation could become the new global standard. The Keepers, exposed and disorganized, found themselves under investigation by multiple international agencies. Their centuries-long reign of control was crumbling as empathetic leaders emerged from hiding across Europe and beyond. William's choice had cost him a crown, but gained him something far more valuable: the freedom to honor his mother's legacy by using his gifts openly and without fear. Catherine's letter had done more than reveal family secrets. It had sparked a revolution that promised to transform the very nature of power itself. The pendant around his neck caught the light streaming through the ancient abbey's windows, and William could almost hear his mother's voice whispering words of pride and encouragement. Her final gift hadn't been information. It had been the courage to choose authenticity over safety, truth over tradition, and love over power. The letter from beyond the grave had delivered its intended message, that some truths are worth dying for, and, even more importantly, worth living for.